You're on the front page, you're still taking in the preliminary assessments from the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl, and Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the authorities are working hard to help Jamaicans affected by Hurricane Beryl get their lives back to normal in the shortest possible time. The Prime Minister spoke to the media on Thursday at the end of a tour of St. Elizabeth, the parish hardest hit by the Category 4 hurricane. We have with us, however, this morning the Member of Parliament for South East Clarendon and the Minister of Labour and Social Security, Prenell Charles Jr. We're due to be joined by the MP for South East St. Elizabeth, Franklin Witter. Good morning, Minister.
Morning to you and to all of the listeners.
Thank you so much for joining us on Nationwide this morning. Minister, as it relates to damage across the island, and we were told yesterday that the teams from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security were being rolled out to assess to see how best they could actually provide assistance. Any update on that?
Yes, so our social workers and officers have been out all day yesterday. Unfortunately, because of the communication issues, it was difficult to hear, in a timely manner, the updates. But I did receive updates that the teams went to all of the shelters to provide support, relief in terms of food. And most of the shelters by now are deactivated up to late yesterday. One or two might still be open with a few persons. We have also started our damage assessment. It's again difficult because some of the roads were inaccessible. However, we have started the damage assessment to enable us to define the quantity and nature of relief that will be required today. So I expect that we're going to have more of the assessment being done, while simultaneously we'll be providing support to the persons who have been hardest hit. And we will continue that effort throughout the week. As you know, several communities have been impacted in the southern coast region, from St. Thomas coming around to Clarendon, going up into St. Elizabeth and beyond. So we will have to shed some focus there to ensure that we can provide the support in terms of ensuring that if we get more rain, which what I'm looking on in terms of the forecast for today shows that we may get more rain, that we do have shelters still intact, and we do have support at the shelters to provide assistance for anyone who has lost their roof or partially lost the roof and is unable to stay home.
And Minister, as it relates to Clarendon, Mitchelltown, for example, Portland Cottage, I'm also being told,
Terrible.
Devastated.
Terrible.
What's the update there?
Listen, man, I mean, there is a trail of destruction in the wake of Beryl. I was up since 4 a.m. yesterday. But again, in Clarendon, it was so bad that we had no phone service. So even while I was there, luckily I had someone who had a Starlink, and I was able to get on to them to contact the Prime Minister for like 10 minutes. But beyond that, profound and far-reaching impact on the people in Clarendon. Going into Mitchelltown, into the area closer to the sea, you had homes completely collapsed, several homes with no roof or partial roofing. Going down into Portland Cottage, it was even worse. Portland Cottage, you had a significant amount of homes, hundreds of homes that had been damaged, either full damage of roof or partial damage, and a few who were completely collapsed as well. In Lioneltown, we had a similar situation, but not as bad as Portland Cottage. Rocky Point, also terrible. Several homes that have been impacted, flooding, widespread flooding, displacement of several families. Luckily, these areas, they are aware and they're alert. So even before the hurricane started, we had many persons who chose to go to the shelter. And I think that was a good thing. I want to applaud them for taking that decision. I think we saved lives yesterday by persons taking precautions. Several who couldn't stay in the shelter went to other homes, to their family or friends, to get shelter. So it was a community effort. Of course, the emotional toll is immense. several persons now have to grapple with the loss of all of the items in their homes. Again, farmers in the area impacted by losing crops, losing livestock. So it's a difficult time. People are frustrated and want support now. So we are just trying to pull together as much support. Yesterday, I was very happy to have the Food for the Poor team come in. They traveled with me, and we were able to give some support to residents in Portland Cottage and a few in Rocky Point, or Rocky Settlement. I'm up and out again today, right after I finish this interview, to go back into the area just to see if we are able to get the JPS team up and moving as quickly as possible, because we had hundreds of poles down. I mean, along one of our main highways, I could count maybe 10, 20 poles down in succession. So the situation with electricity is going to be very difficult. I know Minister Vaz is on top of it. We were in touch with him. And so we're really hoping that we can get things back up and running as soon as possible so that the supplies can get in terms of food and water, and the support to help to rebuild and to recover the area.
Let's take the break, Minister. When we come back, we'll be joined by Frank Witter, the man in charge of Southeast St. Elizabeth. Welcome back. We're talking to members of Parliament whose constituencies were battered by Hurricane Beryl. We're going to try to reconnect with Franklin Witter, who we had, but we can understand the difficulties with telecommunications at this time because the telecoms providers have had challenges in many places, and Frank Witter's phone line appears to have fallen victim to the instability that has wreaked havoc with telecoms and communicating with people in St. Elizabeth. He's the MP for Southeast St. Elizabeth and the Member of Parliament for Southeast Clarendon. The Labour and Social Security Minister, Pernell Charles Jr. is with us. Before I go back to the members of Parliament, the JPS has issued a statement, listeners. It says, well, hours before its planned meeting with the Energy Minister Daryl Vaz, Light and Power Company, Jamaica Public Service, JPS, says it has restored service to 80,000 customers across the island, predominantly in Kingston and St. Andrew, St. Catherine and St. Thomas. Customers in Trelawney and St. James are due to be energized in the early hours of July 5, which is today. The company says the restoration means that over 315,000 customers, or 45% of the network, is now with supply. The Director of Corporate Communications at JPS, Winsome Callum, notes that the company completed the lion's share of damage assessments in less than 24 hours after the passage of Hurricane Beryl. Ms. Callum says JPS teams will continue working on Friday to restore service in the rest of Kingston and St. Andrew, St. Catherine, St. Thomas, St. Mary, Portland, Trelawney, St. James, St. Anne, and Manchester. JPS says it will continue to provide restoration updates and schedules on its social media challenges at MyJPS Online and its WhatsApp channel. It says it is also accepting direct communication via email and text messages. Now, I'm noting the parishes that JPS says service will be restored on Friday. St. Andrew, Kingston, St. Catherine, St. Thomas, St. Mary, Portland, Trelawney, St. James, St. Anne and Manchester. No mention of Clarendon and St. Elizabeth because the situation there is dire according to what we're hearing from people on the ground. And we have Pernell Charles Jr. saying that same thing to us. Do we have Franklin Witter back again? Okay, we can't find him. Minister Charles, the situation where power is concerned and telecoms, you did say that hundreds of light poles, based on your assessment, are down. In terms of blocked roads and access to the areas where the downed poles are, how easy is it for the JPS teams to get in and start the restoration work?
Access to, I'd say, about 90% of the areas. We had community members who came out, and of course, at this time, Jamaicans show a particular solidarity in terms of clearing up the areas. So they're not waiting. They brought out saws, machetes, whatever they could to help to clear the space, particularly because we have a lot of elderly who were trapped in some of the areas based on the fallen poles and the fallen trees. So we were able to clear most of it yesterday. The other issue is that the the electricity is linked to the water, it's linked to other things. So
Yes.
when the poles are down and the electricity is gone, it impacts the pumps, and so you lose electricity, but you also lose water supply in several areas, and you lose communication in several areas. And of course, it's something which we have to be very wary of, because in that rural area and in other rural areas, the span is very diverse and broad. So we have a lot of persons who we have to now be calling them in to the communities or further in, so that we can have access to them, so that they can be safer. If there are any issues, we can carry them to the hospital. And also because we are expecting more rain.
Yeah, I want to ask you though, you're expecting more rain, and that is the thing, because for those who lost their homes, and well, effectively, if you lose your home, if you lose your roof, it's almost like you lose your home, because you can't habit the space because it's roofless. For those who've lost their roofs, those who've lost their homes, how do you now, as MP, help them to transition to somewhere decent until they can repair those homes?
Well, yesterday what we did was primarily two things. We asked family members or community members to house them. We also ensured that the shelters were available if people needed to stay in the shelters. And where possible, we had persons trying to make repairs. So if it was a partial damage to the roof, a lot of persons went, found back the zinc, tried to do what they could to get something back on that roof, to at least allow for some safe space in the house. They couldn't cover all of the roof. It's going to be a long road, George. I'm telling you something. If you come out there, you will see the level of disaster and damage. I can only imagine what happened in St. Elizabeth, because in Clarendon, again, the despair is palpable, right? But again, we are resilient people, and we have already started the process of getting support. As I said, I've been getting calls. We have our local organizations like Food for the Poor, Red Cross. We have other international organizations that are going to be reaching out. The situation now is to be able to manage that support, so that we don't have duplication, or we don't have people who don't need the support taking.
But here's the thing, Minister. Here's the thing. I want you to be, for those of your constituents who can listen to you this morning, and those outside who are hearing you. I can imagine a scenario where people from your constituency are going to be saying next week that they have nowhere to go. You are saying that neighbors whose houses have been intact, or are intact rather, have been asked to take some people in, and that where nobody can find a neighbor to take them in, the shelters that they used during this period, mostly schools, and schools are out, so it's not as if they're competing with children for space, that the schools, the shelters will be open for them. Is that what you're saying? That there should be nobody who wants somewhere to shelter, who had a home, who lost it, who should not be able to find somewhere to rest until they can get themselves back together?
For now, that is the situation as of yesterday. But we are doing the damage assessments. So once we move through the community today, we should be in a much better position to have a clear understanding to be able to determine what's the best approach. But as it's now, George, most of the persons who cannot stay in their homes are housed somewhere else in the community. They are safely put up in the community. We don't expect that they can stay there for a prolonged period.
Yes.
But we can't tell you right now what the situation is. We're doing the damage assessments as quickly as we can.
Yes.
And we will be on the ground consistently to be able to advise persons of what the next steps will be as we go through this process.
There are 4 divisions in your constituency, and you speak about Rocky Point and the devastation down there. So is it that we're to assume that furthest north, Palmer's Cross, not much damage, Mineral Heights, Hayes, not much damage, it's only in Rocky Point that the problem is?
Palmer's Cross and Mineral Heights would have received mostly damage through flooding. There are perhaps a few homes or shops that would have been damaged, but nowhere near the gravity and magnitude of damage of the Rocky Point division. And it's understandable because of the geographical situation. Rocky Point is south. When you look on Jamaica, that hook. That you
Yeah, man,
see
I'm
at
looking
the
at it now
bottom,
as we speak. Yep.
that hook is us. We are that hook. We are Portland Cottage. We are Rocky Point. Went around to Longwood, going up into Mitchelltown, Salt River. All of that southern coast is
Quickly, so we can.
constituency of Southeast Clarendon.
Okay, I was talking to Jeremy off because I wanted, Minister, for the listeners and the viewers, those who can access the YouTube, to see exactly what you're speaking. So we're going to pull up the map of your constituency there. Palmer's Cross in the north, Mineral Heights just below, then Hayes in the middle, and Rocky Point right on the coast with no protection.
If you listen to the forecast, they spoke about Lionel Town and the Portland Bight,
Right.
and how the hurricane would come in and impact that area. We are that area.
Right.
So when I talk about the greatest level of devastation, Portland Cottage in particular, Rocky Point, Mitchelltown, those areas got the brunt force. The other areas, we had a lot of flooding.
That area is like an extension out at sea. What I want to ask you though, Minister, because, and I see you hinted at it prior, we are supposed to be getting rains going into the weekend from a system. What's being done to sort of prepare them in the interim to hold strain over what we're expecting for the weekend?
So the good thing about it that this community, put it this way, they are used to the situation in terms of the vulnerability. So they have already, without even any intervention or instruction, started to repair homes where possible and to identify safe spaces. So we are just going in to make sure that we have the shelters prepared if necessary, and to give further instruction and direction where we see persons who may not have any assistance. Again, the only reason why I'm not out there now is because I'm on the phone with you. So as soon as I'm finished, I'm heading out to office and then heading straight down back to Clarendon.
Immediate question about livelihoods and the fishers whose, I don't know if anybody has lost their boats or boat engines or whatever, but give us a situation where the fishers are concerned and the likelihood of them being able to restart their trade anytime soon.
They will not be able to restart right now. Several of the vessels have been damaged, even the ones that were pulled in, and several of them have been damaged, and some have been lost, from what I'm told. A lot of the fishers who would have had fish pots, those are all gone. So it is going to take us some time. We will have to meet with them, the fisher folk, to get an assessment of what they have lost, and to work with the groups, government and other groups, to see how we can get them back on their feet. I mean, it's going to take them some time.
Yeah, and
a lot of the sheds as well. If I could send you a picture, when I say complete destruction, I mean gone, down, flat.
Send us a
right?
Send it to us. Send it to us.
Other sheds, I'd say maybe 80% damage.
Yeah.
So it's going to be. It's not just the boats. It's the areas that they use to receive the goods, to prepare the goods. All of those are down. I mean, I'm going to have a conversation with the Agriculture and Fisheries Ministry, as well as to see where we can get support to really get people back on their feet.
Yeah. Minister, we have to run. Last question, though, on fresh water. You say that those who live in the corporate area don't understand that when light goes outside the corporate area, water gone same time. So
Exactly.
What happens now where fresh water is concerned for your
We
constituents?
have a serious problem with water. So we're asking for any support that we can to get water in. Once we get the water in, we distribute it to as many families as possible, because right now there is no access. I mean, people have to be trying to buy as much as possible. Yesterday, the municipal corporation came in with a water truck, and it couldn't get to the area, so it had to turn around. So we really are in a dire situation, but I'm hoping that today we'll be able to ensure that that road is possible, or accessible rather, and to get the water to the people across Portland Cottage, Rocky Point, and along the southern coast.
Got you. Thank you so much for spending some time with us, Minister, and all the best out on the road today as we try to cauterize the situation out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
All the best.
Good. To turn our eyes to a bit of international news, the Labour Party secures a landslide victory in the United Kingdom election to end 14 years of Conservative rule. In his victory speech, Labour leader and incoming Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said, "We did it. Change begins now." Outgoing Conservative Prime Minister Rishi Sunak concedes defeat, says he will step down as a leader of the Conservative Party. For a reaction and assessment of the British elections, we are joined by Professor at the Johannesburg Institute for Advanced Study, Sir John Rapley. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are
Thank
you?
you so much for joining us on Nationwide this morning. Sir Rapley, talk to us about the reaction from the British people concerning the elections.
So it really is, I probably would say, a sense of relief above all. I don't think this mandate for the Labour Party is actually quite broad, but very thin and not very strong. Primarily what the British voters are saying is that they're just utterly exhausted by the chaos and incompetence and the very poor service delivery of the Conservative government. So on the one hand, Labour comes in with a very weak mandate, but on the other hand, it comes in with low expectations. So if it simply starts to deliver services again, it will stand to gain some support, but it has a huge challenge ahead, and it doesn't have much room for maneuver because it was very modest in the promises it made on the campaign trail in terms of not raising taxes, not raising debt, and yet there's a huge need to improve public services, to improve defense spending, and they're going to have to find the funds to do this, and that's not going to be an easy task.
You mentioned low expectations, just needing to get rid of the Conservative Party due to the incompetence. But what we recognize as well, and I was saying it to George, that Sir Keir Starmer seems to have won the election, 412 seats so far, but he has one of the lowest numbers when it comes to the popular vote.
Well, that's the striking thing, is that he has 2/3 of the seats in Parliament with only 1/3 of the vote. So it is a very slender mandate. You know, they have lost nearly 7% support since the last election. So both they and the Conservatives are down drastically, of course. They lost nearly half their vote. And there were significant gains by Reform, by Green, by the Liberal Democrats. In other words, I think there's a sort of turn away from the two dominant parties and towards the margins. And that is going to really shape the future of British politics. Partly, I think that reflected the Labour's campaign strategy, which was to sort of not focus on their core support, but actually sort of go into the many constituencies where they lost by small pluralities. And so they needed to only win back a few votes. And that meant sacrificing some of their ideology, if you will, to kind of just reach out to voters based on more pragmatic appeals. So I think that that 34% of the vote they got is a solid 34%. But there's no question, I think one of the big discussions that will happen in Britain is whether the existing electoral system is still fit for purpose. Because to have a government with that kind of majority, with so small a mandate, is very questionable.
John, the issue of executing the mandate now becomes real. Keir Starmer managed to pull off something that I've not seen often, if at all. He managed to posture, to promise to fix everything that ails Britain, while at the same time being very, very spare with the details.
Well, indeed, and I think one of two things will happen. Either he's going to underdeliver, and it will mean that it will be a one-term government because it will be thrown out for not having delivered on the promises to improve things. Or he will have to break some of his promises. They more or less went in saying they wouldn't borrow anymore, they wouldn't tax anymore, but they would spend more, and they were going to pull this out of the hat by somehow engineering an increase in the growth rate. Now, there are some things they can do to improve growth, and there are a lot of things they can do to improve service delivery that don't involve spending money, but fundamentally, it is going to have to raise funds, and that's going to occasion some tough choices. The government will have to start thinking about that, and they will probably have to start thinking about it very soon.
Yeah. The other issue concerns this. If you look at the Tory prime ministers since David Cameron and including him, so you've had him, you've had Boris Johnson, you've had Theresa May before him, you've had Liz Truss, you had Rishi Sunak. All of these, well, apart from Cameron, who, put his future on the line dependent on the outcome of the Brexit vote, all his successors fell on the sword of factionalism within the Conservative Party, who weren't happy with the direction the party was going in, and they mustered enough MPs to change their leaders. I mean, Rishi Sunak was voted out by the electorate. But the point is, infighting within a party with a huge majority, Boris Johnson gave the Tories an 86-seat lead when he won in 2019. I'm asking if the same thing that ailed the Tories, where a faction not happy with the direction of the party mobilized support to oust their leader, is that something that the Labour Party is immune to, or are they susceptible to it as well?
I think actually that's one thing that the Labour Party under Keir Starmer has going for it. They've now actually largely flushed those people out. So they did lose support on their left and far left. They've already left the party and they've been able to secure this majority without their support. I think he starts in a better position. David Cameron started this problem when he said he would hold a Brexit referendum, thinking rather foolishly that that would take the wind out of the sails of Nigel Farage. And of course, all it's done is ultimately led to the rise of Nigel Farage, who for the first time has a seat in Parliament. So that whole strategy, which has ultimately destroyed the Conservative Party and also set the country for quite some time, is now shown to be a complete political failure. And I think that the Conservatives may conceivably never recover.
Oops. We had a major disruption
I
on
think
the
his
line.
Labour Party is fairly solid.
Sir, as it relates to the SNP, the Scottish National Party, they seem to have lost quite a bit as well. What's happening there?
So that would seem to be two things. One is that they lost the referendum on independence, and so that was their whole raison d'etre. And so they're looking for a new reason to exist. Secondly, they didn't actually perform very well when it came to service delivery in Scotland, and they've been punished for that. Traditionally, Labour was the dominant party in Scotland, so it's reverted to the status quo ante, and the question is whether Labour can build upon that and retain that support. It would be too early to declare the SNP down and out for the count, but it is striking, actually, how broad. As I say, it's a very thin mandate, but a very broad mandate that in Wales, in Scotland, and right across England, Labour has a presence in a way the Conservatives didn't, and in a way that Labour hasn't in a good long time. So that, at least, gives him something to start with.
Lastly, John, we're out of time. Would you say overall, I know you're not a man prone to the simplistic conclusions, but would you say overall that the result of this election shows an anybody but Tory approach by the voters rather than we love the Labour Party, let's put them in?
No, I think this is one time a simplistic solution does suffice. That is pretty much what we're seeing. There's very little love for Keir Starmer, very little love for his Labour Party. There's an absolute detestation of what the Tories have done, and they may well spend a long time in the wilderness if Keir Starmer plays his cards right.
But why is there this little love, though? We understand that the Conservatives have done what they've done, but why is there this little love for Sir Keir Starmer?
Well, primarily because he hasn't asked for it. He's not someone who looks for love, put it that way. He's not a terribly charismatic politician. He has not promised, this is a country that is crying out for major change. He has more or less said, I'm not going to give it to you. So even small changes, I think, could boost his popularity. And I think that's rather strategic on his part. I think he's a rather clever man. I think his popularity will, if anything, increase. But he comes in with the country just exhausted by a Conservative government, expecting very little, which means, as I've said, that if he simply delivers, if he simply gets the trains running on time, for example, if he simply gets the water system cleaned up, which are doable things, he could increase his party's popularity. So in many ways, the fact that he's so little loved, I think, could actually be down to his advantage.
Remember those rather COVID debates when Boris Johnson referred to him as Captain Hindsight? Well, today he's captain of the British ship. Thank you this morning, John Rapley.
Have a good day.
Good.